A young nurse got stabbed when she defended a Marine veteran. 24 hours later, she received a shocking presidential invitation. Denise Parker had just finished her shift at St. Jude's Hospital and was ready to go home. Little did she know that something strange was about to happen, an attack that will change her life in ways she never could have imagined. She never saw it coming. The walk home was short, familiar, and quiet. Halfway home, something caught her eye. 3 men stood hunched near a bench under a broken streetlight. At first glance, it looked like an argument, maybe a drunk dispute. But within seconds, she saw it clearly. The men were surrounding someone, an older man. One of them shoved him down. The other kicked him. The third spat and shouted something Denise couldn't make out. The man on the ground didn't fight back. He curled up, arms over his head, helpless. She stopped walking. Her stomach turned. Her instincts screamed. This wasn't a scuffle. This was an attack. Without hesitation, Denise ran. "Leave him alone," she shouted, her voice cutting through the night. The men froze. The tallest of them turned toward her with a sneer. "Keep walking, lady." Denise didn't. "He's done nothing to you. Walk away." The one standing closest to the victim looked at her with wild eyes. He was young, twitchy, maybe high. "You want a problem?" She didn't flinch. "Back off now." That's when it happened. The man with the twitch moved. Fast. A glint of metal in his hand, a knife. Before Denise could register it, he lunged forward and drove the blade into her stomach. The pain was instant and overwhelming. Hot, sharp, deep. She gasped, stumbling back as blood soaked into her scrubs. Her legs gave out beneath her. She dropped to her knees, then onto her side, her cheeks scraping the pavement. The 3 attackers turned and ran. For a few seconds, everything was soundless. Then came the chaos. Screams, running footsteps, a woman shouting for someone to call 911, a man crouching beside her, saying, "Stay with me. Stay awake." Her vision blurred, lights danced across her eyes, and her breathing turned shallow. Someone was holding pressure to her wound. Another voice was yelling into a phone, spelling out her location. Cars stopped. Horns honked. But Denise couldn't move. She couldn't even cry. The pain had taken everything. A siren wailed in the distance, growing louder. The ambulance arrived. She heard someone say her name. "Denise? Oh my God. Denise, it's me, Eric." A paramedic, someone from her hospital. His hands trembled as he loaded her onto a stretcher. "She's losing a lot of blood." Denise Parker arrived back at St. Jude's Hospital, but not on her own 2 feet. She came in on a stretcher, blood pooling under her, skin pale, breath shallow. Her name crackled through the radio before she even hit the doors. "Incoming GSW, stab wound, mid-abdomen, ETA 1 minute. Victim is Nurse Denise Parker." The emergency room froze. No one moved for half a second. Then it was chaos. "Nurse Parker?" "From trauma," someone said aloud. "She's one of ours." The double doors burst open, and the gurney came flying in. Paramedics shouted vital signs and stats while pushing her through. "She's losing blood, pressure's crashing. 70/40. Stab wound to the lower abdomen, left side. Possible organ damage." Faces turned. Familiar ones. Nurses who'd laughed with her at the nurses' station. Doctors who had consulted her mid-surgery. Orderlies who'd walked the halls beside her night after night. And now, they were all seeing her like this. Broken, bleeding, dying. "Clear Bay 3. Someone yelled. They wheeled her in. Blood soaked her scrub pants, her hospital ID still clipped to her collar. That was what broke most people. That her badge was still on, like she was supposed to be helping someone else, not fighting for her own life. Dr. Avery, the attending trauma surgeon, grabbed gloves and jumped in. "She's one of ours, let's move." In seconds, Denise was surrounded. Lights above her blazed white. Monitors beeped frantically. One nurse cut through her shirt with surgical scissors. Another slammed in a second-4 line. Someone was yelling for O-negative blood. "Type and cross now." Dr. Avery barked. A nurse reached to place an oxygen mask over Denise's face. Her eyes fluttered. Barely open. Barely there. "Denise." "Hey, Denise, can you hear me?" Another nurse asked, crouching beside her head. Her name was Rachel. She had shared lunch breaks with Denise every Tuesday for the past year. Now her hands trembled as she gently stroked Denise's hair back from her blood-streaked forehead. "She's tachycardic," another nurse called out. "Heart rate 148 and climbing. Pressure's tanking." "She's going into hypovolemic shock," Avery said. Get her to the OR. Page surgery now. Rachel turned toward the hall, yelling for transport, but Denise was slipping fast. Her eyes started rolling back. Suddenly, everything began to blur, not just for her, but for everyone. Because now it wasn't just another trauma patient. It was Denise, the girl who stayed late to check on post-op patients. The one who bought coffee for the overnight crew. The one who remembered birthdays, kept extra granola bars in her locker for others, and volunteered to cover on holidays. Blood ran off the gurney like spilled ink. Her body, once so full of motion and energy, now lay limp as they pumped fluids, hung more blood, pushed epinephrine. In the haze of action, Denise drifted. She wasn't fully conscious. But in that liminal space between awareness and nothing, something inside her stirred. It wasn't pain. She couldn't even feel the wound anymore. It wasn't fear. That had left her the moment the knife struck. It was memory. Flashes. A child's tiny hand gripping hers after a car crash. The face of a mother weeping as Denise told her the surgery was successful. The time she sang softly to a stroke patient who couldn't sleep. The shift when she stayed 5 hours late just to make sure a man didn't die alone. These memories flashed through her like lightning, cutting through the fog. Not in order. Not clearly. But they came. Hands she'd held. Words she'd whispered. Tears she'd caught. Smiles she'd earned. And in the chaos of the trauma room, while everyone fought to keep her alive, Denise, somewhere inside, clung to the only thing that hadn't abandoned her. Her purpose. Her BP's dropping 60/30. Someone yelled. We're losing her. Avery shouted. Push another AP. Now. A nurse sprinted into the hallway, yelling again for surgery. Then a voice. Soft. Barely audible. She's not breathing. Monitor screamed. The flatline was brief but deafening. Rachel's eyes welled. She bit her lip to stop it from trembling. Dr. Avery looked down at Denise, then closed his eyes for a half-second too long. Get the crash cart. No one said it, but everyone was thinking it. This can't be how it ends. Not for her. She'd spent her entire life saving other people. She deserved more than a cold metal table in a room full of panic. But death didn't care about goodness. And it was knocking, hard. Starting compressions. One nurse shouted. Rachel moved to the head of the bed, her hands trembling as she positioned the ambu bag over Denise's face. 1 minute passed. No pulse. 2 minutes. Still flat. Someone whispered under their breath. Please. Then, a sudden spike. A flicker. 1 beat. Then 2. A rhythm. Slow. Faint. She's got a heartbeat. The monitor cried out. Gasps. A surge of energy. The room snapped back to life. Okay, let's move. Or is ready. A surgical tech called from the hallway. They pushed the gurney forward. Doors slammed open. Rachel ran beside her, still holding her hand. Dr. Avery called out orders as they flew through the halls. But Denise didn't hear them. She was somewhere else again. More flashes. This time clearer. Her first patient. Her nursing school graduation. Her father hugging her when she passed her board exam. Her mother crying with pride. And that man's face. The older man. The one she had shielded. The one she didn't even know. His eyes. Full of shock, pain, and something else, gratitude. She had saved him. But could she save herself? The OR lights beamed down like interrogation lamps. The surgical team scrubbed in fast. The anesthesiologist took over. Dr. Avery glanced down at her again, just before she was under. He leaned close and whispered, You stay with us, Denise. You don't get to go yet. Then everything went dark. No voices. No noise. Just a pulse. Steady. Fragile. Outside the OR, word had already spread through the hospital. Staff members stood frozen in hallways. Security guards who had joked with Denise on night shifts stood with their hands folded. Janitors prayed silently in storage closets. Doctors kept glancing at the OR board like it held their own fate. Hours passed. The door finally opened. Dr. Avery stepped out, peeling off his cap. He looked exhausted. His scrubs were stained. His shoulders slumped. But then he looked up. She made it, he said. A collective breath released. A nurse covered her mouth and wept. Someone clapped. Another person just dropped into a chair and sobbed. Denise Parker, the nurse everyone loved, had fought for her life. And won. She didn't wake for another 24 hours. But when she did, the first thing she saw was a room filled with flowers. Her chest rose and fell with effort. Her abdomen burned. But her eyes were open. Rachel sat beside her, gripping her hand. "Hey," she whispered. "Welcome back." Denise blinked slowly, then mouthed a word. "Alive." Rachel nodded, smiling through tears. "Yeah, you are." Outside, the monitors beeped gently. Nurses passed her door with quiet reverence. They'd all seen patients survive impossible odds. But this one was different. This one was personal. Because Denise wasn't just another patient. She was one of them, and she had survived the fight of her life. The sun broke through the half-closed blinds of room 408, casting pale stripes of morning light across the floor. Outside, the world was waking up, but inside, time moved slower. Machines hummed in a soft rhythm, and the scent of antiseptic clung to the air. Denise Parker stirred. She wasn't fully conscious yet, just drifting in the haze between dreams and awareness. Pain pulsed in her side like a heartbeat, steady but distant. Her body ached, but it was the quiet that grounded her. Not the quiet of death, but of survival. She was still here. When her eyes opened, she was met by a flood of color. Flowers, cards, balloons, dozens of them, lining the windowsill, stacked on the counter, pinned to the walls. Their brightness was almost surreal in contrast to the sterile white of the room. She blinked, her dry eyes adjusting to the soft light. Voices murmured outside the door. She turned her head slowly and saw a familiar face. Rachel, the nurse who had been with her since the trauma room. She entered quietly, carrying a plastic cup of ice chips and a soft, knowing smile. "Morning," Rachel said gently, setting the cup beside the bed. Denise tried to speak, but her throat was raw. Rachel helped her take a few chips, and the coolness numbed the pain enough for her to whisper. "Did the man I tried to help?" Rachel paused. Her smile widened. "Yes," she said. "You saved him." Denise's eyes fluttered shut, a soft exhale escaping her lips. Relief washed over her in waves. She didn't even know his name, just that he was older, alone, outnumbered, and that he would have died if she hadn't stepped in. She had wondered about him since the moment the world went dark. She opened her eyes again. Who was he? Rachel hesitated, her lips parting like she was about to say something, then stopped. "You'll want to hear that from someone else," she said cryptically. Denise furrowed her brow, but said nothing. An hour passed. Nurses came and went. Vitals were checked. More flowers arrived. Doctors made their rounds and nodded in approval at her recovery. Her stats were improving. Her wound was healing. But something in the air had shifted. She sensed it. Something was coming. Then came a knock on the door. Not a nurse. Not a doctor. A tall man stepped inside, mid-40s, clean-cut, wearing a crisp black suit. He wasn't a hospital administrator. He wasn't with the press. His presence felt different. The kind of presence that drew stillness into a room just by existing in it. "Miss Parker," he said. Denise turned her head slowly. Her heart picked up, more out of curiosity than fear. "Yes." He stepped forward and gently pulled a folder from his inner coat pocket. On the front, a deep blue emblem with gold trim. The seal of the President of the United States. She stared at it, her brows tightening. "I'm here on behalf of the President," the man said. "May I?" She nodded slowly, her voice failing her. He opened the folder and removed a single, cream-colored envelope sealed with a gold crest. With careful hands, he offered it to her. She took it, her fingers trembling slightly as she broke the seal. Inside was a letter. She read it once, then again. "To Ms. Denise Parker, it is with the deepest gratitude and respect that I extend my personal thanks for your extraordinary courage. Your selfless actions in defense of another, without regard for your own safety, embody the highest ideals of this nation. The man you protected is a dear friend, a patriot, and one of our country's most honored veterans. I would like to meet you in person to express my appreciation and recognize your heroism. Please accept this invitation to the White House at your convenience. Respectfully, President of the United States." Her mouth opened, but no words came out. She looked up at the man. "The person I saved. Who was he?" The man stepped closer, his expression softening. "His name is Colonel Thomas Keene, retired U.S. Marine. 3 tours overseas. Silver Star, Purple Heart, defense advisor to multiple administrations." Denise's heart began to thud harder in her chest. And, the man continued, "He is a close personal friend of the President. They served together before the Colonel went into special operations." Silence filled the room. Denise's grip on the letter loosened slightly. Her hands fell into her lap. "You're saying?" "I saved a man who is known and trusted by the highest levels of this government," the man finished gently. "He's family to them. You didn't just save someone. You saved him. She swallowed hard. She had never heard his name before. Had no clue who he was when she ran into that alley. He had just been a man. A stranger. Being hurt. Needing help. That's all she saw. And that was all it took. A tear slipped down her cheek before she even realized it. Not from the pain. Not even from the recognition. But from the overwhelming truth of it. She had stepped into the darkest moment of someone's life and saved him. Not because he was powerful. Not because he mattered to anyone else. Because he was human. Does he? No, I'm okay, she asked softly. The man smiled. He does. He's been calling every few hours for updates. He wanted to be here today, but he's recovering too, he said. And I quote, "Tell her she saved a Marine who doesn't go down easy." That made her laugh through the tears, a soft, cracked sound that filled the room with warmth. The man took a small step back, sensing the weight of the moment. There will be time for more details, more recognition. But today, we wanted you to know the truth. You didn't just change a life. You shook the walls of Washington. He nodded respectfully and turned toward the door. Before he left, he added, "The president asked me to tell you something personally." She looked up. He said, "America saw a nurse step into danger for a man she didn't know. That's the kind of courage we need more of. That's the kind of person we honor." Then he was gone. Denise sat still, the envelope in her lap, the letter trembling in her fingers. Outside her window, the city carried on. Sirens passed in the distance. Cars honked. People walked to work without ever knowing that a simple act on an ordinary night had sent ripples all the way to the highest office in the land. And the woman responsible for it all sat quietly in a hospital bed, blinking through tears, trying to make sense of a world that would never be the same again. She didn't ask for recognition. She didn't even know who she was saving. But fate had a strange way of working. And now, the name Denise Parker was known in places she had never dreamed of. Not because she was trying to be a hero, but because, in one impossible moment, she became one. The human body is remarkable in its ability to heal, but even more remarkable is the will that drives it. Against every careful prognosis and cautious prediction, Denise Parker recovered faster than anyone expected. It baffled her doctors. Stab wounds to the abdomen, especially ones that led to significant blood loss, were rarely followed by swift recovery. But Denise defied the standard charts. Just days after barely surviving surgery, she was sitting up, walking, eating, and, most astonishingly, smiling. There were moments of pain, yes, sharp twinges that reminded her of the trauma, but her spirit refused to lie down. Something inside her had ignited, something stronger than painkillers or stitched muscle. Purpose. Her room had been a sanctuary of flowers, letters, and admiration. But when the discharge papers were signed, and her 4-line was finally removed, the real journey began. That morning, she stood by the mirror, buttoning a crisp navy blue dress beneath a light coat. She looked at herself, not as a victim, but as a woman reborn through fire. Her hair was pinned neatly, a simple gold necklace resting on her collarbone. The scar beneath her dress tugged every now and then, but it didn't deter her. She'd survived worse than a twinge. Outside, a black government-issued SUV idled at the curb. As she stepped outside, the driver, a quiet, broad-shouldered man in a dark suit, opened the door for her. No words were exchanged. None were needed. She slid into the back seat, hands clasped in her lap, eyes wide with thought. The city passed in a blur outside the window, Washington, D.C. in its bustling, stoic rhythm. She had only visited once before, as a child on a school trip. That time, she'd stood at the gates of the White House, peering through the iron bars, snapping photos like every other tourist. Now, she was going inside. As the SUV approached the secured gates of the White House, the mood shifted. Security agents nodded as they checked credentials. The motorcade passed through. Denise exhaled, nerves catching up with her heartbeat. This wasn't a dream. She wasn't lying in a hospital bed anymore. This was real. The vehicle rolled to a stop. An aide opened her door and extended a hand. "Miss Parker, welcome," he said with a warm smile. She stepped out, blinking against the afternoon light. Cameras were already snapping. Dozens lined the walkway. Reporters murmured her name as shutters clicked and voices whispered in awe. She kept walking, chin up, every step controlled despite the tight pull of healing skin beneath her coat. She was escorted through the south portico and into the White House. Hallways gleamed. Floors shone. Flags lined corridors that had borne the footsteps of history. Presidents, diplomats, war heroes. And now, a nurse. The aide led her outside again, through glass doors into the rose garden. And there, waiting beneath a crisp blue sky, stood the President of the United States. He wore a navy suit, tailored and immaculate, but his smile was soft and genuine. Beside him, in full dress uniform, stood Colonel Thomas Keene, the man she had saved. His posture was straight, his eyes steady, but there was warmth in them. Pride. Gratitude. Rows of chairs filled the lawn, occupied by dignitaries, officials, press, and scattered among them, her parents. Her mother, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief. Her father, stone-faced and proud, hands folded across his chest. And behind them, a few familiar faces, doctors from St. Jude's, nurses she had worked with, all of them glowing with joy. The President stepped to the podium, cameras zooming in as microphones were adjusted. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "today we gather not to speak of politics, but of courage. Real, raw, undeniable courage." He turned to Denise and gestured for her to join him. As she stepped forward, the applause began. It was not loud. It was not theatrical. It was reverent. The kind of applause that resonates not from celebration, but from respect. Denise stood beside the President, hands folded, unsure where to look. The air around her felt thick with reverence, but also with disbelief. Just days ago, she was clinging to life. Now she was here. The President continued. "Denise Parker is a nurse, not a soldier, not a politician. Just, if you'll forgive me, a citizen." And yet, when faced with danger, she didn't walk away. She ran toward it. She saw a stranger in trouble and chose to put herself in harm's way. And in doing so, she saved a life. He turned toward Colonel Keene. The life she saved was not just any life. Colonel Thomas Keene has served this nation with distinction for over 3 decades. He is my personal friend, my brother in arms. He would not be standing here today without her. Keene gave a small, respectful nod, his eyes meeting hers with quiet gratitude. The President continued, voice steady. "We talk a lot in this city about service, but we rarely witness it as purely as we have with Denise Parker. So today, it is my great honor to recognize her not just with words, but with action." He turned slightly to face her. "Denise, as of this moment, you are appointed the new head nurse of the White House Medical Unit." The audience gasped, then burst into applause. Denise froze. Her hands covered her mouth. Her eyes flooded instantly with tears. The President stepped forward and handed her a small badge encased in glass. "It's yours. You've more than earned it." Then came the second surprise. "We also believe that no act of heroism should go unsupported. So today, on behalf of this nation, we are gifting you a new government vehicle, waiting just outside these gates." Another wave of applause. And lastly, the President added, turning toward the audience, "A new home, located just minutes from the White House. Fully furnished. Yours. No rent. No mortgage. Just our thanks." Denise's knees nearly gave out. Her breath hitched. Her parents openly wept now. The President reached for her hands. "Denise," he said gently, "you remind us what real strength looks like. You didn't know who that man was. You didn't ask. You just acted. That's why this country honors you. That's why we will never forget you." He pulled her into an embrace. Cameras clicked. The audience rose to their feet. It was not ceremony. It was not pageantry. It was truth. In that moment, Denise Parker stood as a symbol, not of fame or politics, but of selfless human instinct. The instinct to protect, to serve, to stand up when no one else will. As the applause carried on, she turned to Colonel Keene. He stepped forward and offered her a salute. Then, surprising everyone, he pulled her into a hug. "Thank you," he whispered. She whispered back, "You're welcome." As the ceremony ended, she spotted her parents making their way to the stage. Her mother's arms wrapped tightly around her. "I'm so proud of you," she sobbed. Her father simply said, "You're incredible." The aides moved in to guide her toward the residence wing, but she paused at the edge of the lawn. Just for a second. She looked back at the podium, at the seal, at the place where her life had changed again. And she whispered, more to herself than anyone else, "I was just walking home." And yet, that one walk had brought her here. Not as a nurse, not as a victim, but as a hero. The morning sun spilled softly through tall colonial pristine corridors of the White House. Silence filled the space, not with emptiness, but with calm authority, the kind only history and purpose could produce. In the stillness, the quiet sound of footsteps echoed gently against marble. Denise Parker walked those halls now, not as a guest, not as a tourist, but as part of the story. She wore her white coat like armor, not heavy, not burdened, but dignified. Her ID badge, clipped just above her heart, read, Head Nurse, White House Medical Unit. The weight of the title still settled fresh on her shoulders every morning. Yet each day, she wore it with the same humility she had as a trauma nurse back at St. Jude's. Her shoes made no noise on the polished floors, and she never rushed. She had learned early in her career that calm was contagious. When people saw you composed, they breathed easier. It was the same in the emergency room, the same in trauma base. Now, it was true in these rooms where the stakes were just as high, only more secret. Denise passed familiar faces. Secret Service agents gave her polite nods. Administrative aides offered morning smiles. Even senior advisors paused to let her through without hesitation. She wasn't just a nurse in the building. She had become a presence. Her first stop each morning was the White House Medical Unit. Tucked into the secure lower levels, the unit wasn't flashy. It didn't need to be. It was functional, precise, and quiet, just how Denise liked it. As she entered, her team was already at work, reviewing medical files, preparing for the day's scheduled visits. Vitals ready on the ambassador's staff, a junior nurse said, handing her a clipboard. Denise nodded, flipping through the chart. Her eyes were sharp, focused. Prep room 2. I want full panels. No assumptions. She moved through the morning with practiced rhythm. A diplomat's spouse with chest discomfort. A Marine aide showing early signs of exhaustion. A member of the speech-writing staff with a persistent cough. Every patient mattered. Every detail counted. This wasn't a hospital of hundreds, it was a sanctuary of influence and leadership. And she ran it with care. Between appointments, she returned to her modest office. There were no grand decorations, just soft lighting, a photo of her parents on the desk, and a small frame quote that read, "Do what's needed. Do it with grace." She took a quiet moment with her tea, breathing in peppermint and memory. That dark street where it had all begun felt far away now, geographically, emotionally, spiritually. And yet, she carried it with her. Not the trauma, not the pain, but the moment itself, the decision, the instinct to step forward. It hadn't just changed the man she saved. It had changed her. That afternoon, during her rounds, she was summoned quietly to the West Wing. Request from the president's team, the message said. Urgent, but routine. She met him in his private study, a room filled with old books and soft lamplight. He stood from his chair and smiled when she entered. Nurse Parker, he greeted warmly, using the title with respect. Sir, she replied, giving a small nod. I just wanted to thank you. Again, he said. I read your medical report on Colonel Keene's latest checkup. You've bought him years he didn't think he had. I only did what any nurse would have done, she said. The president chuckled. That may be true, but most wouldn't have done it with a knife in their side. She smiled, not because of the compliment, but because even now, even here, the core of her identity remained intact. She was still the nurse who ran toward trouble instead of away from it. When her shift ended that evening, Denise didn't take the SUV that had been assigned to her. She chose to walk. The streets were safe here, familiar. Her modest home stood in a quiet neighborhood 10 minutes away. A white two-story with a blue door and a small porch swing that creaked in the breeze. She unlocked the door and stepped inside. It smelled of cedar and coffee, faint lavender from the oil diffuser in the corner. A cozy throw blanket was draped over the couch. A row of books lined the shelf near the staircase, medical journals, a few novels, and a stack of letters she still hadn't replied to. On the wall hung a photo from the White House ceremony. Her standing between the president and Colonel Keene. Her eyes in the photo were glassy, overwhelmed. She didn't look heroic. She looked human. That was her favorite part. She changed into sweatpants, tied her hair back, and moved to the kitchen. Dinner was simple, grilled vegetables and rice. As it cooked, she stepped onto the back porch, the air cool against her skin. She thought of her old life. The hospital. The chaos. The regular patients who waited hours in the ER. The impossible shifts. The loneliness. The victories. She missed parts of it. She always would. But here she felt something else. Something she never expected. Peace. A car passed slowly down the street. A child's laughter rang out from somewhere nearby. Wind rustled through the trees. Inside, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Rachel, her friend and fellow nurse from St. Jude's. Got your care package. The interns love the books. Miss you. Come visit. Denise smiled and replied, promise. Soon. As night settled, she pulled the curtains closed and sat down to write in her journal. She didn't do it every night, but when she did, it helped her stay grounded. She wrote, it still doesn't feel real sometimes. But I know who I am, and I know why I'm here. The title, the home, the cameras, it's not the reward. The reward is that I get to keep doing what I love. Quietly. Fully. For others. She closed the book, placed it on the nightstand, and turned off the light. The house went still. Weeks passed, then months, and Denise's life found a steady rhythm. She had adjusted to her new reality, not just the job or the house, but the way people looked at her. She had become a quiet icon, though she never saw herself that way. People stopped her on the street less frequently now, but their eyes still carried that moment of recognition. Some nodded respectfully. Others offered quiet thank yous. It was enough. She was asked many times to speak publicly. At universities, veteran conferences, medical symposiums. She politely declined them all. Not out of fear, but principle. The moment that made her known was born in silence and instinct. To drag it into spotlights and microphones felt wrong. Instead, she mentored young nurses. Quietly, without press. Once a month, she visited a local community college to lead workshops. She talked about real-world emergencies, the mental toll of caregiving, the importance of emotional detachment without losing empathy. She never talked about the incident, not directly. But it was always in the room, lingering like an unspoken truth. Students respected her deeply, not because of her fame, but because of how grounded she remained. They saw a woman who had gone to hell and walked out with her soul intact. One morning, a student lingered after class. You make it feel okay, she said. To be scared, but still go. Denise only smiled. Fear's not the enemy. Hesitation is. One afternoon, as she left the White House medical unit, a woman in a business suit approached her in the hallway. You're Nurse Parker, right? Denise paused. Yes. The woman smiled softly. You treated my father last month. The retired Navy man with heart arrhythmia. He said you made him feel human again. Denise tilted her head gently. He is human. The woman's eyes welled. Not everyone treats him like that anymore. Moments like that didn't make headlines, but they mattered more than anything. They were reminders that the legacy she was building wasn't forged in the past. It was unfolding quietly, moment by moment. The days continued like quiet brushstrokes on the canvas of her new life. Denise made time for herself in between her duties, time to read, to cook, to walk without agenda. She developed a ritual of journaling each Sunday night, reflecting on the week not just as a medical professional but as a human being still reconciling with a life forever altered. Sometimes she would visit the Lincoln Memorial after work, not out of patriotism, but because something about the solemn expression carved into stone made her feel less alone. She'd sit on the steps, far from the tourists, and let the enormity of it all settle around her. She didn't need monuments to remind her of consequence. She lived it. Every time she stitched a wound or calmed a panic attack. Every time a patient trusted her with pain they hadn't spoken aloud. She carried it all, and she never complained. On the anniversary of the attack, Denise didn't mark the date with sadness. She took the day off, baked a peach pie from her mother's old recipe, and delivered it to a local shelter near where the incident had occurred. She didn't tell anyone who she was. She just handed over the pie and smiled. That night, she wrote in her journal, "The day I almost died is now a day I give something back." In her living room, the photo montage still played sometimes, usually when visitors asked, or when she needed a reminder of the road behind her. The footage began with her walking home that night. Grainy streetlight video, the confrontation, the knife, the fall, then the ambulance, the ER. The faces of her colleagues fighting to keep her alive. It shifted to recovery, to the letter with the presidential seal, to her first visit to the White House, the rose garden, the badge. The last image was of her walking the hallway, her hallway now, white coat flowing slightly as she turned a corner, focused and calm. The voiceover was her own, recorded quietly in a studio months after the incident. It was only used once, in a short documentary that aired briefly and was archived online. It said, Denise Parker never sought fame. She simply did what was right. But in a single moment, She reminded the world what courage looks like. The screen faded to black, and her story lived on. If you enjoyed this powerful story of courage, sacrifice, and quiet strength, be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more compelling stories just like this one. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What did you feel about how the story unfolded and how it all ended for Denise Parker? What stood out to you the most? Her bravery in the face of danger, her healing journey, or the life she built afterward? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to rate the story on a scale of 1 to 10. Also, tell us where you're watching from. We're always excited to see how far these stories travel. We'll be reading every comment. Stay tuned for more stories that remind us of what true courage looks like.